They say rivers hear everything. But on the morning the fire was lit by the water's edge, the river did not speak. It watched. No one noticed at first. The smoke rose gently, the fire crackled softly, and the young woman smiled as her fish grilled beautifully over open flames. Customers laughed. Coins clinked. Hunger was satisfied. Yet beneath the calm surface of the river, something ancient stirred. The elders would later say the signs were there. The water pulling backward instead of flowing forward. The fish surfacing without fear. The sudden silence of birds when the first fish was turned on the fire. But hunger makes people deaf. And success makes warnings sound like jealousy. They did not know the river had laws older than the village itself. They did not know some fish were not meant to be sold. And some fires were never meant to burn so close to sacred water. And they certainly did not know that the woman watching from beneath the river's skin was not angry yet. Because river spirits do not punish quickly. They warn. They wait. They count how many times you choose profit over respect. How many times you ignore the quiet voice telling you to stop. By the time the river finally answered, the grill was empty. The fire was dying. And the young woman's fate had already been sealed. This is not a story about a mermaid's anger. It is a story about a rule that should never have been broken. Before we continue, like and subscriber. Your support means a lot to us. Now let's continue. The sun had barely risen, and already smoke curled above the riverbank. It was a gentle smoke, almost playful, but it carried the smell of change. The young woman had been preparing for this morning since before dawn. She had arranged the fish carefully on the grill, each one gleaming, each one promising gold coins for her hands, her hungry family, her stubborn pride. The villagers whispered as they approached. Some admired her skill, others whispered about the river, about the old stories. But she smiled at them, smiled and waved, her hands never trembling as she flipped the fish over the flames. And the river, it watched. The water moved differently, almost curling backward, almost as if it were breathing in. No one noticed, except the fish. Some of them flopped toward the shallows, gasping, as if trying to warn her. She laughed at that. "You've never been eaten, so you have no idea what's waiting for you," she said, her voice carrying over the water. And from beneath the surface, she felt it. A pair of eyes dark and deep, staring at her. The river did not speak, not yet. But something in her chest tightened, as though the water itself was warning her. And still, she ignored it. By midday, the grill was alive with smoke, and the smell of roasting fish filled the air. Customers came and went, laughing, exchanging coins, praising her hands. But the river had begun its slow reply. A shadow moved beneath the water, a flicker of green scales, a ripple that had no wind to make it. It was subtle, almost invisible. But the young woman felt it as a shiver running down her spine. She shook her head. "Imagination," she muttered. But the fish in her basket twitched unnaturally. And the water hissed softly, like the warning whisper of a voice carried under the surface. The first sign was small, almost polite. A fish leaped from the water, and landed near her foot, alive, gasping, its scales glimmering unnaturally. She picked it up, and her fingers burned slightly where the scales touched her skin. "Odd," she whispered, and then laughed nervously. But beneath the laughter, a warning lingered. The river had spoken, and she had not listened. By afternoon, the air had grown heavy, hot, suffocating in a way that felt unnatural. She noticed her reflection, or at least, she thought she did. But the water was calm, darker than usual, and it refused to show her face. A figure emerged slowly from beneath the surface, long hair trailing in the current, eyes like molten jade. It did not speak. It did not move quickly. It only watched. Her heart began to pound. This was no ordinary creature of the river. This was something older, something patient, something that counted wrongs as carefully as it counted ripples in the water. The customers noticed her sudden silence. "Are you feeling well?" one asked. But she could not answer. Her throat had grown tight, as if the river had already begun its claim. The figure raised a hand, almost imperceptibly. A single warning gesture. She wanted to flee, but her pride held her. Her coins, her fire, her fish. All of it chained her to the riverbank. And the river waited. Counting, silently, inevitably. That evening, as the sun began to dip behind the trees, the first true consequence fell. Her best customer, a man who always praised her hands, left abruptly, his eyes wide with fear. He whispered something about the river spirit, and never returned. Her stomach sank. Her hands shook. And the fish on the grill refused to cook evenly. Flames danced higher, smoke swirled in unnatural shapes. And each fish seemed to scream in silence, scales flickering like tiny warning lights. She reached for one, and it slipped from her hands, falling into the water. The river swallowed it instantly, without a ripple. And in that moment, she understood the first truth. The river was angry, and it demanded more than coins, more than pride, more than fish. Her customers murmured, backing away, whispers of curses and warnings filling the air. She tried to laugh it off, to keep the fire alive, to keep her business running. But the river had already begun to take, and nothing she did could stop it. That night, she could not sleep. Not because of hunger, not because of coins, but because of the river. In her dreams, the water rose higher than the tallest trees. And in its depths, the figure of a woman, or was it a mermaid? Her eyes burned like green fire, and she spoke in a voice that was not heard, only felt. "You have taken what is mine, and you will learn, whether by fear or by loss, what it means to break a rule." She woke screaming, the sound swallowed by the stillness of the river outside. Her fire had died in the night, her fish gone, and her customers did not come. And she realized something terrifying. The river had begun counting. And the first warning was nothing compared to what it could do next. Her hands trembled, her heart raced. She knew that in trying to survive, she had awakened something older than the village. Something that could punish with silence, or take with a touch. And she had nowhere to hide. The next morning, the village seemed normal, almost peaceful. But the young woman felt unease curling in her chest like smoke from her grill. When she returned to the riverbank, the water appeared calm, too calm. Fish that had once been lively floated listlessly, their eyes glassy. And the fire she lit refused to catch properly. Flames sputtered, twisted, then vanished, as if swallowed by the river itself. A customer approached, cheerful at first. But when he saw the water, his face paled. He whispered something about spirits, about the river taking warning. But she waved him off, laughing nervously, insisting it was nothing. And yet, the river began to move differently, almost playful. A sudden splash here, a ripple there. Fish leapt just out of reach, teasing, mocking her pride. The figure beneath the water surfaced briefly, hair trailing like dark silk. Eyes glowing green, lips barely moving. No sound came, but she felt the message clearly. "Do you think you can ignore me and live unscathed?" The girl shivered, but her stubborn heart told her. "I have survived before. I can survive again." She did not notice that the river had begun to mark her space. Little things subtle, a fish missing, smoke curling toward the wrong direction. A warning that the river would escalate. And she had already ignored the first signs. By afternoon, whispers ran through the village. Not about her cooking, but about the river. And the strange woman who appeared in it. Some said she had hair like floating shadows. Others said her eyes burned brighter than fire. Curiosity brought a stranger to the riverbank. An old man, hunched and cautious. He stared at the young woman's grill, then at the water. And then, finally, he spoke. "You must respect the river," he said, voice trembling. "They are not fish you sell, but life you take. And some lives belong to water, not fire. The young woman laughed nervously. Old tales, just stories to scare children, she said. But the river rippled violently, almost as if it had heard her mockery. The old man shook his head. He pointed to the water. And she saw it, a figure slowly emerging. Hair flowing, eyes like a warning she could not ignore. The river was no longer patient. And she realized it could no longer wait. And the first visitor was proof. Some warnings cannot be ignored, even by those who believe themselves clever. That evening, as she cleaned the fire, she felt a sudden sharp pain in her hand. A fish, one she had touched earlier, bit her. Its teeth were small, almost insignificant. But the burn of its jaw ran deep, like a warning fire she could not extinguish. She screamed, and the villagers nearby jumped back in fright. But when they asked what had happened, she could only shake her hand. No words came. And the fish flopped back into the river, alive, untouched, yet victorious. Her pride began to waver. Something inside whispered, "This is not mere accident." And the river, it shimmered with a light of green. A warning, calm and terrible all at once. She tried to ignore it. Tried to laugh, to sell her fish. But each moment the river seemed to respond. A fish moving against the current, smoke that twisted unnaturally. A feeling of being watched, of being measured. And that night, when she returned home, she dreamt of the river again. But now, the figure beneath the surface had a hand reaching toward her. Not to pull her in, not yet. But enough to remind her. No rule goes unpunished forever. Days passed, and her hands trembled more often. Customers noticed her strange glances toward the water, her sudden silences. Some stopped coming. Others whispered that the river was cursed. And yet, she continued, lighting the grill, flipping fish, counting coins. Pride stubborn as fire. The river began sending more signs, subtle, cruel. A fish floating on its side, scales missing. Smoke that refused to rise, circling back to her. Whispers in the wind. Voices she could almost hear, but could not repeat aloud. Her dreams worsened. Water rising around her village. The green-eyed figure staring from beneath the surface. And her own reflection, twisted, smiling back at her. A warning she could not understand fully, but understood enough to fear. Her mind began to fray. Not with illness, but with the terror of being watched, measured, punished. And still, her stubborn heart insisted. I can survive this. I am clever. I can ignore the rules. But every ripple, every twitch of a fish, every curl of smoke, whispered otherwise. The river would wait, but patience is a long game. And she had already played poorly. By the 10th day, the village itself seemed uneasy. Even the wind carried a whisper of warning. And the young woman felt it in her bones. The river was no longer testing, it was marking. Counting, preparing. The green-eyed figure rose fully from the water that morning. Not to attack, not yet. But to deliver a warning unmistakable in its power. You have taken what does not belong to you. And yet you continue. Her heart froze. Her hands shook. Her pride faltered. And for the first time, she wondered if she had misjudged the river. If she had ignored something she could never ignore. And in that moment, the river whispered again. Calm, terrible, patient. A promise that all rules broken would someday be repaid. But not today. Not yet. Just enough to make her fear. Just enough to make the village watch. And just enough to keep her alive, for now. The next morning, the river was quiet again, too quiet. Even the birds refused to sing. The young woman approached her grill with a heavy chest, each step feeling heavier than the last. Her hands shook as she placed the fish over the flames. The fire caught reluctantly, flickering and twisting, as though it were afraid of the water. A sudden chill ran down her spine. And she felt it, the eyes again, watching, waiting, counting. This time, the figure emerged closer. Hair flowing like black silk, eyes glowing green, scales glinting with a faint light. No words were spoken. No movement beyond the slow, deliberate rising from the water. And yet fear gripped her, like cold hands tightening around her chest. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide. But she was rooted by pride, by stubbornness, by the need to survive. A ripple crossed the river. And the fish on her grill hissed. Not from the fire, but from something deeper, something alive. She dropped the tongs, and it fell into the flames. Smoke curling into the air, but not comforting, only ominous. Her stomach nodded. She knew, whatever this was, the river was testing her. And she had no choice but to play along, or lose more than fish, more than pride. And the lesson she refused to learn was coming closer, silent, patient, unavoidable. The wind whispered through the trees. And the river pulsed, alive, waiting. Counting, judging, teaching. And she had no idea how close she was to paying the price. Or how much it would cost her. The morning air was heavy, almost suffocating. The river seemed darker than ever, shadows crawling across its surface. When she approached her grill, she felt it immediately, the weight of the river's gaze. The green-eyed figure emerged fully, long hair trailing like liquid shadow, scales glinting ominously in the sun. No words were spoken, only a tilt of the head, a quiet warning. The young woman's hands trembled, coins slipping from her pockets, fish falling from her grip. And still she tried to smile, tried to continue her work, as if fire and fish could shield her from what was coming. A ripple ran across the water. Stronger this time. The river moved with purpose, small waves slapping the bank. And each fish seemed to scream in silence, scales flashing like lightning. She tried to run. But the river pulled at her mind, whispering her failures. Her pride, her greed, her stubborn refusal to respect the rules. And in that moment, she understood, she could not escape the reckoning. Not fully. The river had already begun. And her fate was no longer hers to decide. The villagers watched from the trees, fear etched into their faces. Some whispered prayers, others trembled silently. No one dared approach. The young woman reached for her fish. And the figure beneath the river raised a hand. Not striking, not yet. But the air itself changed. A cold, invisible force pressing down on her chest. Her voice faltering, words failing. She could not call for help. One of her prized fish leapt from the grill. And in an instant, it disappeared beneath the water. Gone, swallowed by the river, as if it had never existed. The fire sputtered. Smoke curling backward toward her, stinging her eyes. She fell to her knees, realizing the first true lesson of defiance. The river does not punish loudly. It teaches silently, painfully, and makes sure you feel every choice. She wanted to cry, to apologize. But no sound escaped her lips. Only fear, only understanding, only the knowledge that some rules are older than survival, older than hunger, older than pride. By dusk, she barely moved. Her hands shaking as she tried to keep the fire alive. The river had begun counting every misstep, every bite of fish, every coin she had earned without respect. The figure surfaced fully, eyes blazing green, hair flowing like black water. And this time, it spoke, a voice felt in the chest, not heard with ears. You have taken what is mine, and ignored the warning. Yet there is still a choice. Learn, respect, surrender, or suffer. She fell to the ground, tears streaking her face. Her pride shattered, her stubborn heart quivering. She wanted to obey, to kneel, to beg. But fear alone was not enough to undo the days of ignorance. A ripple ran across the river. Stronger, more deliberate. Her hands brushed the water, and it burned, a gentle warning. Not yet destruction. but a promise of what would come if she continued. The villagers whispered, prayers rising like smoke. And she realized the river's patience was not endless. And her choices now would decide everything. Night fell, and the river was alive. Dark waves lapping at the bank, whispers rising from beneath the surface. The figure surfaced again, closer, taller, more real than ever. She tried to flee, but found her feet heavy. Her voice gone, a silence that pressed like water. Every coin, every fish, every act of stubborn pride had brought her here. And the river was finally claiming its due. Her fire died, smoke curling uselessly into the night. The river surged. And one by one, her prize fish vanished, swallowed by the depths. And with each disappearance, she felt something leave her. A little of her courage, a little of her hope. Until only fear remained. The villagers shivered in the dark, watching a lesson being taught. A rule older than the village. A warning that no greed, no hunger, no pride could overcome. She sank to the river's edge, hands trembling. Finally knowing, that survival was not just skill. It was respect, humility, obedience to rules older than any human story. Dawn rose. But the village felt emptier. The young woman's voice was gone. Her fire cold, her fish gone, her pride broken. The figure beneath the river watched silently, green eyes fading just enough to let her live. Not to reward but to teach. A mercy wrapped in fear. A lesson carved into her very being. She had survived, barely. But the river had marked her. The cost of defiance was not death, not yet. But silence, loss, and the bitter weight of understanding too late. The villagers returned to their daily lives. Whispers of the river's power lingering. And the young woman, she never grilled by the river again. Coins never tasted the same, fire never burned the same. And every time she looked at water, she remembered the price of ignoring rules. The river waits. Always. For those who think survival is skill alone. But the true lesson, respect for forces older than us. That is the rule no human can ever break, and live unchanged. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and tell us if her punishment was deserving.